Hey Fatheads, welcome to another episode of Sharing Our Pairings. This is episode number 3. Cigar Surgeon along with the Village Idiot, or should I say our new Master Overlord, Logan.
MF and CEO, man.
MF and CEO.
I know, man. Dude, the first day in office was a tough one. I about had to sue a major cigar brand for copyright infringement, and dude, it got wild.
Did you have to fire anybody on your first day?
Rob almost got fired last night. 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, Rob would have been out on his keister.
With great power comes great responsibility, Logan.
That's what they say, and also comes abuse of power.
Yeah, I think that's more likely than great responsibility, quite frankly.
That's probably true. But, yeah, I mean, I take care of you and everyone else. And there's more people joining now and watching this random bunch of bullshit, so awesome.
Well, maybe we'll talk about something substantive here then for our listeners now joining in. So, of course, this is our pairing show. We're going to be talking a little bit about bourbon. We're probably going to be rambling a lot as we drink heavily, forgetting about what our topics are, but that's okay. You guys will stick with us because you love us. So today, I am, being the Drew Estate whore that I am, I am smoking Undercrown, and there's a reason for this. I am also smoking a, what did you call it before the show?
Lafroig.
Lafroig. So
no, Lafrag or something.
Lafrag, yeah. So I'm smoking the Lafroig Triplewood. Now, normally this is, because it's, and I'm sure some of you noticed I'm wearing a cowboy hat today. It is like friggin' 91, 92 freedom units here. So it's quite warm in Canuckville. Normally it wouldn't be 91, 92 degrees here, but this is summertime and we get like a half dozen of these a year. Normally you would not want to drink a Lafroig, which is a smoky, briny, salty, heavy, peaty cigar, or malt. It is the wrong scotch to be drinking on a hot day. It's sort of the equivalent of drinking a really thick stout on a hot day. Just not going to quench your thirst at all. You really want to go with something sweeter, lighter. But you know what? I'm willing to make sacrifices for the audience. I'm willing to taste stuff that shouldn't be tasted. I'm all about the sacrifice for our listeners, Logan.
Dude, this is why, Surgeon, you're my favorite employee. But I've got to call out the fact that you are wearing a cowboy hat. And first of all, most people that are listening in on the podcast probably can't see your face. First of all, you're a skinny individual as it is, and you're Canadian.
I like to think of athletic, but skinny. We'll go with skinny.
Let me just say you're wiry. I would put you in the wiry category. Wiry. Now, why are you wearing a cowboy hat? Because if anyone should be, it should be me, because I'm in Texas, but I've never worn a cowboy hat in my life and never will wear one in my life. But why are you in Canada wearing a cowboy hat right now?
Well, Logan, that's a good question, and there's a couple answers to that. First of all, because this is Calgary Stampede Week, I am in the city of Calgary. We have Stampede, which is the greatest outdoor show on earth. It's also the largest outdoor show on earth. It is essentially a 10-day festival of rodeos, chuck wagons. It's got a huge carnival midway. Essentially, if you can imagine, the biggest midway show coupled with a rodeo in the world that lasts for 10 days with heavy drinking. That's what this event is. And as far as I'm aware, it's the biggest rodeo in the world.
Even bigger than a rodeo like in Texas, like the Texas State Fair?
Yep, those guys actually come up here to compete for the Calgary Stampede.
No way.
And the funny thing is, because I know when I was down in Austin, we were kind of talking to people down there. I mean, in a lot of ways, Alberta is... Everyone in Canada calls Alberta the Texas of Canada. We've got beef. We've got oil. We've got a long history of rodeos and cowboys. And our politics are maybe not conservative compared to the U.S., but compared to the rest of Canada, very, very conservative. Very conservative. And we have pride in hunting, and people like to own guns and that sort of stuff.
Do you have the death penalty?
We don't have the death penalty because that's set out on a federal level instead of a state level.
Okay.
But I'm not entirely confident that if it was set out on a provincial level that we wouldn't have the death penalty. I think there's a pretty good chance we would.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, now that you've went all like cowboy on me and cowboyed up, my pairing tonight, first of all, I got to say a thank you last week or 2 weeks ago show, Anthony Russo, Fedhead, great guy, took it upon himself to procure my address, and we were talking about the proper Glen Heron glass and how it's proper for tasting. And he sent me not just 4 Roses, but sent me like, it almost looks like shot bottles my dad used to, because I did grow up on a ranch, but like medicine we used to give the cows in bottles like that almost. But it's literally sent me a random smattering of like 10 or 15 different bourbons, and that's why we're talking about bourbons tonight. So I am actually smoking the Ortega Series D, my go-to, in 4 Roses.
That Four Roses is actually a pretty tasty bourbon, and not exactly on the inexpensive end of bourbon. So that's a pretty generous gift. I mean, if you were to rank top 10 bourbons, Four Roses would be in that list.
So, okay, we'll come back to that. But I'll tell everyone, I want you to do the impression of me when I was sticking my nose too much in the glass. Tell me why I was doing that wrong.
So I've been to, I enjoy going to whiskey tastings, and the best whiskey tastings are from guys that are from Scotland. The distillery representatives will come out, and there's a great guy from Buclody who just retired, and he had this great seminar. He said, you got to treat your Glencairn glass like a woman. You don't want to just rush up to it with your nose, you'll scare it off. What you want to do is you want to bring it up and say, hello, how are you? Just kind of wave it under your nose, don't get too close, just say hello. Take it away, give it some time to get used to you, bring it back up, take another whiff. Yeah, get a good nose. And the reason he says this is because you're talking about, like, even your bourbon there, all of this stuff is at 40 to 46, 48% alcohol, and if you get your nose right in there, you'll essentially blow out your nose. Like you really can't smell anything until your nose recovers. So you kind of want to, I mean, you really do start out just sort of approaching it, getting some notes, and then you can get your nose in there a little bit more. But you really don't want to blow out your nasal passages.
So, understood, because it has a little bit of a medicinal quality to it, but after putting it in the glass, and first of all, it's got some crazy legs on it, you know, after taking a sip, which was pretty cool, but it's almost like a butterscotch, like a peanut buttery butterscotch. It's kind of weird.
I find it's got almost a syrupy mouthfeel to it as well. Like, instead of like a vodka or something, which is really thin, it's very thick. When you put it in your mouth, you kind of move it around. It's got some substance to it.
It definitely does. Like, compared to, like the Balvenie Double that we were drinking last time, I mean, that was like drinking water. This is like drinking almost like buttermilk in comparison.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, it's definitely good. Doesn't have too much burn. And actually, I mean, all in all, I mean, the Ortega Series D, I mean, I love it. It's a phenomenally priced cigar. I love Eddie as a person, even though he calls me a cracker, which is totally racist. And because I'm a white guy.
But true, you are a white guy.
But I am white, and he calls me a cracker. And I give him crap about being Cuban and manana. And then he called me fat a couple weeks ago. Totally destroyed my ego. But that's neither here or there. But
I'm sure you've never heard that before. That was the first time you ever heard that slang.
No, I actually had. Believe it or not.
I'm surprised.
Hey, surgeon. There's a line you're stepping on. Calling me fat.
I'm not saying I don't love you, brother. I'm just saying there's a lot of you to love. There's a lot of you to love.
Oh, dude, you're skinny.
No, that's a compliment.
Dude, listen here. I am descendant from Vikings / Irish people. I got a big freaking frame, man. That's not my fault. But I will say, though, is after the Eddie conversation, I'm a little self-conscious. So what did I do? I talked to my boy Seth, Big Tuna.
Yep.
And you know how healthy that guy is. Like, he's eating fucking chia seeds and roots, and God knows what that guy's eating. But he's like, so what do you eat on a daily basis? And I kind of told him. And he's like, so you eat a chocolate chip muffin every morning for breakfast. He goes, where do you get this muffin? And I tell him I get it from a local grocery store, HEB, right? He goes, holy shit. I go, what? And I'm thinking this thing's like 50 calories, 100 calories.
Oh, dude.
600 calories.
Absolutely. Easily.
So, since then, I have cut out the muffins. And I've literally lost, like, this has been like 2 weeks ago, I've literally lost 3 pounds because I've cut out. So that's like, if you don't eat those muffins, you will lose a pound a week. If you don't do anything else, and just stop eating those muffins. So anyways, that's not really what we're here to talk about. But
no, you know what? I want to talk about that for a little second because I actually am a former fat boy myself, and it's hard to tell, but I lost 60 pounds, and in part of how I lost 60 pounds was stuff like that, going through my diet and realizing I was eating way more stuff than what I thought I was, because I just had no sense of how many calories were in things.
But let me say this, because I'm a pretty wide frame, so I can support the extra weight.
You got big shoulders, man.
I got big shoulders. I'm a broad guy. I'm Irish. Like, and part Viking. I would love to see pictures. I would love to see pictures when Surgeon was a bigger fella. It would be, dude, are they having a rot rally up there too? Do you guys ride Harleys too, or what?
And man, it's summertime. Everybody's got their bikes out because they know they got about 20 days to ride before the snow sets in again, so they gotta get it in while they can.
No shit. Oh shit. So,
yeah, man, I looked like I'd been attacked by a hive of bees. Just
no shit.
Kind of puffy all over.
No way. When did you lose all this weight?
Well, I lost the first group. It's about 8 or 9 years ago, and then I kind of got fat again because I got comfortable and I just ate stuff like it was going out of style. And then it was about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I lost 30. Like I gained back about 30 pounds, and I lost about 30 pounds again. And now I'm sort of hovering around where I should be, maybe plus or minus 8 pounds or so. But I feel better. And honestly, you know, I can enjoy stuff like a scotch. I don't have to worry about the calories because I know that I'm not, you know, having 2 bowls of ice cream after dinner, and I'm, you know, not overeating. So
it's true. And the other thing that made me feel really bad was about, I don't know, maybe 3 months ago. I was having a rough morning, man. And I start working early because, you know, global company, I work all the time, late, early, whatever.
yeah.
And Seth calls me to tell me something at Big Tuna, and he goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "Oh, nothing. I'm eating an ice cream sandwich." He goes, "Dude, it's 8:30 in the morning." And I was like, "Dude, I want a fucking ice cream sandwich. That's just hitting the all of it, man. I want an ice cream sandwich." And so after talking to Seth and having Eddie ridicule me, I'm definitely, and I got to get skinny to wear those leather pants and tube top for Grace here in about a week. So
that's right, man. IPCPR's coming up.
I've got to go buy leather pants because I shockingly don't have them. But you think I would, but I don't. I know.
Can you believe that? As a quality Texan, you would have some other pants.
I know, man. You'd think. So, Surgeon, let's talk about bourbon.
Bourbon.
So, bourbon is a U.S. thing.
Bourbon is a U.S. thing.
And it's a Kentucky thing.
It is, but not necessarily as a reason of law or a requirement.
Okay. Why don't you just give us the rundown, because you're the guy. You know all this shit.
Well, the funny thing is, so I'm not a bourbon guy. That is, I enjoy bourbon, but I have a good buddy, Urban Cannibal. He introduced me to bourbon. He introduced me to whiskey. He's kind of he's my guy. He's the guy that was the gatekeeper and sort of slowly led me down the garden path of responsible drinking of spirits. And so I actually had to do a little bit of reading on bourbon today, and we talked, I think it was last episode actually, we talked a little bit about whiskey, and whiskey with an E and whiskey without an E, and what's a whiskey and what's not. Bourbon is whiskey. There are many things that are whiskey. There's rye whiskey, bourbon's whiskey. Bourbon is one of those whiskeys with an E, because it's American. And bourbon actually comes back to the 18th century, so there is a lot of history behind bourbon. 95% of bourbon is actually made in Kentucky, not by requirement, but just because that's sort of where the process started, and that's where the tradition is. So it's kind of like going to Scotland, you know, and you say, well, there's a particular region that has more distilleries than others. Is that a requirement? No, it's just kind of how it worked out. Yeah. And in reading up on the bourbons, what was interesting is that a lot of the distillation process came from, of course, immigrants coming into the United States, Scots, mostly the Scots, the Irish, and they probably wanted to get drunk, and they said, well, got to set up some
They
distilleries.
probably wanted to get drunk.
They probably wanted to get drunk. I mean, who doesn't want to get their drink on?
Someone who doesn't want to get their drink on is my wife. She, well, obviously is about 3 weeks away from having her first child, so obviously she's not drinking now. But we had the conversation because one of our friends on the 4th got very intoxicated at our house, or got pretty intoxicated, and she was like, "Man, I couldn't imagine feeling hungover ever again." So, quick public service announcement: this show does not condone alcoholism or problem drinking. We are in it for the enjoyment of the spirits, and that is it.
Yeah, we make light of it, but especially in Scotch and any other spirit, there really is a attitude of drinking better and drinking less, which is a phrase that they use all the time. Drink better, drink less, because honestly, if you're spending like on a bottle of Four Roses, you could spend a pretty decent whack of cash. I mean, you have 3 or 4 of them, you're going to stop appreciating the whiskey, and you might as well just switch over to vodka or, start slamming shots, because you're really not going to appreciate the beverage after that point. It's kind of wasted on you at that point, I think.
So why is Four Roses so good? Why is it in the top 10?
I don't know, man. I think, it's like certain distilleries in Scotland. I think everyone's got their own tastes, but there's certain distilleries that tend to put out a better product than others. Four Roses is one of those products that consistently tends to rank in the top 10. And this isn't just my opinion. I mean, I'm a pretty opinionated guy, but there's lots of independent tasting competitions and stuff where they consistently place in the top 10 because they put out a quality product. They obviously have whatever it is, if it's their still or the way they do their mash or whatever it is, their secret. They've got it down and they keep it consistent, and they just presumably haven't changed from a winning recipe. I think
they just rock it basically.
Yeah.
Well, with that, Surgeon, let's take our first break, and then we'll be back after this quick commercial interruption.
Sounds good.
And we're back. We're sharing our pairings. I am the village idiot, Logan, and we've got. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't want to steal your thunder, Cowboy.
That's okay, brother. Cowboy Surgeon, Cigar Surgeon.
So, who is this next segment brought to us by? Surgeon, you had something special you wanted to talk about.
I did. This next segment is brought to you by the Rocky Mountain Smokeout. It is a cigar and beverage pairing event being put on in my home state province of Alberta, October 3rd and 4th. The event is not in the city itself. It's outside of the city at a place called the Stony Nakota Casino and Resort. So it is a casino. You can smoke there, which is something you can't really do in most places in Alberta. So the event's going to include Cuban cigars. So hopefully that'll draw some people out who are looking to try some Cuban cigars. There's going to be a lot of spirit pairings. So there's going to be bourbon, lots of rums, which is really great. I love trying rums. There's going to be some scotches, some whiskeys. There's even going to be some wines and some ports. And the casino is full service, so they do have a hotel on site. So you can literally come out, go out to the event, stay there for the weekend, and then fly back out if you want to. But it's a great event. Kind of fits in naturally to our show, I think, with the pairing. So check it out. The website, for those who want to look it up, it's RockyMountainSmokeout.ca, and it is also on CigarFederation.com, which I know you're all members of. You can go there and check out the event if you look under our event section.
Yeah. I wasn't having a baby or going to India or having to go on to Ontario for a couple of days in that area, I would love to show up. So
it's going to be a humdinger.
It won't be a humdinger. You know what I think's great? And this is just because I saw this on Facebook a second ago. If someone just linked to something that was like, study finds no link between secondhand smoke and cancer. And I was like, what? This is like perfect timing. This is awesome. Great. With all the FDA stuff, it's obviously. But the article was back from like December of 2012. I'm like, so that's not just happened. I hate when people do that. It always
Well,
tricks me.
I read that study, and it was a pretty broad study. I think that was the one where they did it's like 50,000 spouses
It was.
of smokers, which I mean, you're really not going to get somebody who's other than maybe a waitress or a waiter. You're really not going to get someone who's around secondhand smoke more. I can't imagine. And they literally found absolutely no scientific link between rates of cancer and their spouse smoking. And I think you know, as I've lost weight, I'm all about the healthy, but I'm also about the right information. And if secondhand smoke doesn't actually make people sick, then I think people need to know that information, and they need to be armed with that information, because you know we've grown up our whole lives being told that secondhand smoke is a killer and it's super dangerous. And if that's not true, then people need to know that.
I mean, I would agree with you. I mean, I am no scientist, so I'm not going to dispute the facts. I just have a hard time believing that there's not some sort of causal relationship, not between cancer and it, but some sort of effects, purely just because, dude, like I've been in the smoking room for how long, Surgeon? Maybe like a month and a half, 2 months maybe?
You got it.
And Jared was just here last week. I installed my in-room AC, which has it, a nice, balmy 73 degrees in here. And it's
Beat those
beautiful.
Texas summers.
I do it. It's awesome. And I looked up at the vent because I have a fart fan up there that evacuates extinguishes all the kind of the smoke out of the room. And dude, it's already got like a yellow funk on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We don't have to get into the politics of it. But yeah, I mean, I think waitresses. I think people that work at, who knows? But yeah. So, anyways, that was a completely random thought. I just thought I'd bring it up because I thought you listeners might want to know and actually give a shit, but probably you don't. That's okay. Surgeon, that means you take over and say something intelligent.
Absolutely. So, talking about bourbon, so we're talking a little bit about Kentucky. So, 95% of bourbon is actually made in Kentucky. It's not a legal requirement. Like Scotch, the United States government did make some legal stipulations, partially to protect the industry, partially to define the industry. There's actually a resolution in 1964 that defined bourbon as a distinct U.S. product, very similar to Scotland declaring Scotch as a distinct Scot product. And I think that's good because there's a significant history behind bourbon. I don't think there's any doubt that bourbon is an American origin product, and it's important to protect that product and that history. So to kind of get into the legal stuff before we get on to bourbon, so it has to be produced in the U.S. Can't have a bourbon outside of the U.S. You can have a bourbon-like product. You could even have it made the same way, but to be called a bourbon, has to be produced in the U.S.
Okay.
Bourbon is made with corn. It's a corn mash. So unlike Scotch, we talked about, which is barley, and whiskey, which is primarily can be made of rye or wheat or some other grain, has to be made with corn. It has to be at least 51% corn. Now, 51% is the lower limit. So a lot of places, most places from what I was reading, will typically do 80%. That's where they get their primary flavoring from, is they'll do 80% and then they'll mix it in with something else. So that something else could be rye, and something else could be wheat. Really up to the distillery what they do.
Question. Sorry to interrupt, but okay, so it makes sense. Now, question one is Kobe beef has a set of standards that comes out of Japan. The U.S. equivalent to that is Wagyu, right? And I'm drawing a parallel here. So what do we call bourbon that's made outside of the U.S.?
That's a good question. I actually couldn't find any bourbons that were made out of the U.S., so I'm not sure. And it's possible there are some, and hopefully maybe this can be some homework for our listeners for our next show. Find some, put our loyal listeners to the test, and go out there and find some quote-unquote bourbons that are made outside of the U.S. and go under a different name, because I think that'd be really interesting.
Okay. The next question, because I'm the idiot on the show, is that with this bourbon, right? I don't know if anybody else out there has the guilty pleasure in watching the show Moonshiners like I do, but dude, Tickle's my boy. But they make most of their mash with corn, right? So would that actually be considered a bourbon?
Well, I mean, you could have the same process, but it has to cover every single one of those legal requirements to be declared as a bourbon. So you could have something that sort of follows half of them, and in the strictest sense kind of follows most of what a bourbon is, but is not a bourbon
Because it's not legal, obviously.
because it's not legal.
Got it. Interesting. And I want to call it something interesting really, really soon because I poured this probably not quite 30 minutes ago.
Yep.
I've had a few swigs, and when I did the first thing, what did I say when I first put it in? I said it was a little what? Medicinal.
Very medicinal.
And now, like, honest to God, I don't know if it's my stinker's all clogged up or what it is, but that medicinal is gone. Like, I can't even smell that anymore. And it literally, I mean, it smells like almost like a freaking Werther's Original.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Caramel and toffee.
Yeah. It fucking smells great. Doesn't really taste like that, but it smells fucking great.
I find that a lot on most of the spirits, like the whiskeys and rums and stuff. I've learned to pour them, have a couple sips, but kind of let it sit because as the oxygen hits the spirit, it does do something to it. I mean, I'm no scientist either. I don't know what that is. Maybe one of our listeners can talk about it, but it does evolve the character. It gives a lot more nose, a lot more taste. So you pour something. So we're talking about drinking responsibly. If you were to pour one of these, pound it back in 5 or 10 minutes, you're going to lose a lot of the character that could potentially be there. Whereas if you take your time, launch your own cigar show, drink heavily as an excuse. Wear cowboy hats. You can really appreciate the full character of what's there. So bourbon, I know for sure is that way. Whiskey, Scotch, rum. So, I mean, maybe I'll talk about my pairing because I haven't really talked about this. So, this Lafroig is very smoky. Again, I talked about really not a summer drink. You can drink it during the summer, but this is really what I call my fall and winter drink. That heavy, smoky, briny, salty flavor is winter to me. I should be drinking like a Glenrothes or a Glenfiddich 18, 15, something very sweet, something very sherried. That would be perfect for this heat. But the reason I went with that is because I wanted to pair with an undercrown, and what I typically get out of an undercrown is lots of smoke. So kind of building off that whole smoky idea, the undercrown to me has some pepper in it and some sweetness. So I thought, well, maybe a good pairing with the undercrown would be Lafroig. The undercrown can be pretty strong, so the Lafroig isn't going to be overpowered by the cigar, and I don't think the cigar is going to be overpowered by the Lafroig. And honestly, so far it's been pretty good. I do find the saltiness in Lafroig is offset very well by the sweet and pepper of the undercrown. So this was just kind of a random pairing I came up with. I would say that this is not amazing. Like, it's not it's not going to be my top 10 pairings, but this is, if you want to mess around with pairing, I don't think you could go wrong with this. This is a really great way to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think my pairing's a little interesting because these are kind of two different. Like, I mean, obviously the Ortega, I'm not sure if it's a Nicaraguan Puro. Well, obviously it's not because it's a Mexican San Andreas wrapper, but obviously tons of pepper, some earthiness, some nice spice. And this is like, I'm telling you, sucking on a Werther's Original. And it's kind of an interesting combo because it's kind of heavy, much like the body on the Ortega is. So I think that kind of clashes a little bit for me. I mean, I think something a little lighter would probably go well. But overall, I think the flavors meld pretty well, considering I don't drink that much. And other than tea, so far, this might be my favorite pairing.
Nice.
But that's not really saying shit because I don't have many. So.
Well, you know what? We'll work on it. You got how many other bottles to go through now?
I think Anthony literally sent me like 10. So I'm covered for half a year.
Yeah,
basically.
So Logan's going to be doing bourbon pairings for the rest of the year for our show.
Pretty much.
So getting back to bourbon, so we talked has to be produced in the U.S., has to be made from at least 51% corn, so corn distillate, typically much higher than that. Like whiskey, it's got to be aged in oak barrels. The interesting thing about bourbon is that it's aged in charred oak barrels. So they do char the inside of it. They cook it essentially with flame. That presumably gets some of the impurities out of the spirit as it's aging.
Okay.
The bourbon can't be distilled to more than 160 proof, which for the rest of the world is 80% alcohol by volume. 80% is a lot. You wouldn't drink anything at 80%. That's crazy town.
No.
When you bottle it, it has to be put in the bottle at less than 125 proof, which is for the rest of the world 62.5. 62.5 is that's a race car. I mean, that you're not drinking at 62.5 if you want to taste for the rest of the day. You're going to water down from 62.5. But if you can get a bourbon at cask strength is typically anything 48% and above. You're going to get a lot more drink for your money. You're not going to be drinking this at 55, 58, 61. You're going to water it down. You're going to add some filtered water. So in essence, you're getting almost maybe a third of a bottle more value because you're getting more beverage. And what I find, especially with cask strength bourbon and whiskey, is you're going to get a lot more character from the bourbon than if it was 40% or 43%, because it's not been watered down initially. You can kind of control how that works for your tasting experience. So I typically will prefer cask. Sometimes it'll cost you a little bit more money, but I think it's totally worth it. And then the last thing really is the lower limit of bottling has to be 80 proof, which is 40% alcohol by volume.
Okay. So
a lot.
Go ahead.
A lot of that's pretty standard. I mean, a lot of that mirrors what was in Scotland when
I was gonna say, yeah.
you know, they just kind of took those processes.
So let's talk about this char oak barrel here. Is I have a filter that's on my fridge for the water dispenser.
Absolutely.
It's a charcoal filter, much like a Brita or anything like that, and it filters a lot of the impurities out of that. Is that kind of the same process with the bourbon?
That's my understanding. I mean, I'm by no means a a distillery expert. The knowledge I've got is from attending tastings and listening and asking questions. But my understanding is that's exactly why. Part of it is it imparts some smoothness to the liquor. Part of it is to take some impurities out. But I think when you char a barrel, sometimes you're going to get a lot more character out. So like bourbon is really known for its sort of caramel and vanilla, and whether it's like a straight bourbon or whether it's a whiskey that's been aged in a bourbon cask, what's really interesting about that is that flavor really carries through. Even if it's just a whiskey that's been aged in a bourbon barrel, that primary bourbon character is really there. Like you can still taste that.
Got it. Okay. Interesting.
Now, the one thing I didn't talk about, Logan, is that unlike the Scotch industry, the bourbon industry cannot reuse casks. So when you put your bourbon in a barrel, when you age your bourbon, when you finally pull your product out, you can't use that barrel anymore. You have to get rid of that barrel.
Really?
Yep. That's by law. So
are there bourbons out there that just aren't called bourbons?
There might be. Again, I'm not sure, and I think maybe we can give some homework to our listeners to find out if there's a second use bourbon. But my understanding is almost all the bourbon casks are being bought up by the Scotch and whiskey industry. So they'll take those casks, they'll buy them presumably at a pretty decent price. They'll break those down, they'll put them on a boat, they'll ship them over to Scotland or Ireland or Japan or wherever they're distilling, and then they use that to finish or age a lot of their spirits in.
Interesting. So that kind of brings me back to my question. I know we've kind of talked about this before, but if you look at the Balvenie Doublewood, it says first cast whiskey oak, right? Mm-hmm. So whiskey could be a pure whiskey, like a Jack Daniels or something like that, but it could also be a bourbon. So whiskeys are bourbon, or bourbons are whiskeys, but not all whiskey. No.
Yep.
Well, how the hell does it go? Tell me.
So all scotches are whiskeys, not all whiskeys are scotches.
Got it.
In this case, whiskey just sort of refers to a particular style of distillation. And you've got, like, we've talked a little bit about it, but you've got a lot of whiskey out there. You've got bourbon, which is really a corn whiskey. You've got rye whiskey, which, as the name says, it's rye. You've got your grain whiskey, which is really wheat primarily. And then you've got your Scotch whiskey, which is your barley.
Got it.
And presumably there's rice whiskey, I'd imagine. I need to do a lot more reading on whiskey because there's a ton of different varieties of whiskey out there, and it's all fantastic.
I thought when you used rice, that was sake.
I'm gonna have to look that up, but I'm pretty confident that sake is essentially rice whiskey. Now, someone's gonna come back and correct me, and I appreciate them for doing so, because I know sake often gets referred to as rice wine, but I was sure that sake is essentially a rice whiskey. And it's delicious, by the way. I had some a couple days ago with sushi. Fantastic.
Interesting. I did not know that. So I was just doing some Googling here, and of course, when I Google it, freaking doesn't want to work. But I found some. Basically, I Googled obviously the top 10 bourbons in America, because obviously they need to come from America. But let me just read some of these down and see if you've had any of these and see what you think. Jim Beam Signature Craft Bourbon Whiskey 12-year-old.
Yep. It's good. It's smooth.
Yeah. Now this makes me a little weird. Jim Beam's Devil's Cut.
Haven't had the Devil Cut.
Because that looks like a pure marketing scam to me. Is it that good? I don't know. We'll see. Knob Creek Single Barrel 9-year.
Knob Creek is fantastic. I would absolutely recommend Knob Creek. Very smooth, lots of character. Knob Creek has a lot of different age statements that are available. They call them expressions, I think. 9's really good. They have a 12. I think they even have a 15. And man, Knob Creek is really, really tasty stuff.
Okay. Next one.
Actually, I'll cut you off there for a second.
No, go ahead.
We have a good question or discussion going on in the audience about Jack Daniels, and Jack Daniels being a Tennessee whiskey versus a bourbon. I forgot to talk about this because I had no idea what the difference was between a Tennessee whiskey and a bourbon. And there is a very specific process to Tennessee whiskey. So specifically to be called a Tennessee whiskey, there's a process. It's called the Lincoln Country process. And what that means is, we talked about the charred oak barrel. Okay. So when you age your spirit, it has to be aged in a charred barrel. But after it's aged, you don't put it in a charred barrel anymore. Now, the Lincoln County process. Oh, you want to pause for a second for a commercial break?
Why don't we come back to the Lincoln County process on this side of the other side of the break? Konnichiwa. We are back. We're sharing our pairings, episode 3. Cigar Surgeon, aka Drinking Surgeon.
Hi,
Logan,
y'all.
MF and CEO / Village Idiot. We were just, Surgeon was about to drop some knowledge on the other side of that break about linking Tennessee whiskey like a Jack Daniels to bourbons and what the difference. Continue, Surgeon.
So Lincoln Country process, so still follows the same initial bourbon process, but after it's done, after you take it out of those oak barrels, you're using charcoal filters again. And it seems kind of simple, but that is a very, very specific process. It's unique to Tennessee, and in order to be branded a Tennessee whiskey, obviously it has to be made in Tennessee, but it also has to follow this particular process. So you're going to see a lot of bottles out there that are labeled bourbon. You're going to see barrels out there that are labeled Tennessee whiskey. And to be labeled Tennessee whiskey, you know that it has to be this process. What that means, I don't know. We're probably going to pick up some bottles in the coming weeks, try it out and compare, maybe do some side-by-side with some Knob Creek or some Four Roses and some Tennessee whiskey, and compare them, see what they're like.
I mean, I think the difference, and I could be completely different or completely wrong here, but I thought Jack Daniels, although it might meet all the things for a bourbon, it doesn't actually use charred barrels. I thought they actually drain that shit through like coals and charcoal. Is that right or is that wrong?
I believe that's correct. Yeah.
Is that the
So
difference?
yeah, so that's that charcoal filtering. So you're taking it out of the cask that's been aged in, and now you're putting it through a secondary filtering process. And that secondary filtering process is the Lincoln Country process that is specific to Tennessee whiskey.
Got it. There you go.
Yeah.
Have you had the Blanton's original single barrel bourbon whiskey?
No, can't say that I have.
The Lidl, I'm going to pronounce this shit wrong. It's Lidl, UK, Western Gold Kentucky bourbon whiskey.
Interesting. No, I have not.
Hogs Bourbon 3-year-old.
Hmm. I have had the hogs.
Okay.
Tasty.
Okay. Peps and Richard. Dude, that's not even like, that's like naughty. That's like European. 1792 Ridgemount Reserve Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey.
Now, the interesting thing is, and I forgot to write this down, but there's a difference between bourbon and straight bourbon. I can't recall off the top of my head what that is, so I'm going to have to take that away. But straight bourbon refers to a slight difference in the maturation process, and I'm going to have to take that away, but I haven't had that. Long
Okay.
story short.
Jim Beam Black, 8-year-old.
No, haven't had the Jim Beam Black.
What about Hudson Baby Bourbon Whiskey?
No, sounds like I've got some bourbon home.
Yeah, no. Eagle
Man, I
Rare,
gotta-
single barrel, 10-year.
Nope.
Interesting. Well,
Yep. Sounds like I better get my allowance from my new CEO and see if I can pick up some bourbons here and get some tastings done.
you could not put that on your corporate expense account, Surgeon, unfortunately. Because
Thank you very
one,
much.
hey, I'm already muling all this stuff for you anyways. If you need me to buy you some alcohol too and bring that, I can do that too, I guess. Whatever.
Now,
I
one of the
could.
things, well, I appreciate that. You're a good guy. Contrary
Sure.
to what people bust your nuts, but
Hey, man.
at the end of the day, I think everyone knows you're actually a really good guy.
I try.
And I'm not just saying that because you're my boss.
Because you're my boss. So, what were you about to say? You're about to say something insightful, I think.
Well, I don't know if it's insightful, but one of the cool opportunities we're going to get at the IPCPR coming up is a whiskey tasting.
This is true.
Now, have you been to a whiskey tasting before?
I think IPCPR 2 to 3 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, they had a whiskey or some sort of tasting with 4 kicks by Crowned Heads. And I remember I went to that, and obviously I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm not sure 4 kicks is the right thing to be pairing with anything, because it's definitely on the milder side. Depending on, I can't remember what it was paired with, but I don't remember it being, I mean, I love the 4 kicks, I just don't remember it being anything that I'd write home about.
Now, you actually found that the beverage overpowered the 4 kicks?
It did.
Really? That's interesting.
It did. So, what's up with Pappy? Everyone always talks about Pappy Van Winkle. What the hell's Pappy Van Winkle?
Got me, brother. I have no idea.
What? Apparently it's like some really awesome shit that's like limited release that comes out. John Brook from Drew Estate drinks that shit all the time.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to pick up a bottle of that. I mean, I'm gonna essentially have two cabinets. I'm gonna have one for my Scotch whiskey, and I'm gonna have to have one for my bourbon. So I'm gonna have a bourbon collection just for the show, because that's how much I care about the Fedhead listeners. Is I'm willing to spend money on booze. That's right.
You are willing to spend money on booze. So, how's your pairing coming along? Has it progressed? Has it changed? How's it going over there with the Undercrown? Oh, Toro, right?
It's the Toro, yeah. So we talked a little bit about how we like to pair, and I think you and I are kind of on the same page. We usually like to start with lighting up the cigar, kind of getting into it, letting the cigar kind of establish itself a little bit, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then sort of ease into the liquor. And that's kind of how I like to do things too. I think if I start with the booze, I think my palate doesn't quite adjust properly. I think that if I go beverage first, then cigar, I think what happens is my taste buds get blown out by the alcohol. And I think if my taste buds get a chance to adjust with the cigar and then get into the spirit, it's more of a play off of each other instead of one being more dominant. I mean, the Undercrown is not a T52. It's a great cigar. I was actually thinking partway through the cigar that one of the other things that might actually go really well with this Lafroig is the Nica Rustica.
Rustica.
The Rustica, the El Brujito. Because I find that a little bit more spicy, and I got some sort of nuttiness off the Brujito, and I think that might be interesting with the Lafroig. And one of the things I actually didn't talk about, because we talked a couple weeks ago about the quarter cask, which is sort of one of the other products they offer. So this is, for me, this is a new product. This has actually been out for a few years, but this is aged in a couple different casks, which is why they call it a triple wood. So this has, to me, a little bit more depth than the straight Lafroig. So if you're a guy who doesn't really like the peaty end, the smoky end of things, definitely not the whiskey for you. You're not, like, this is the sort of deep end of the pool when it comes to smokiness.
Okay.
But if you do like smoky whiskeys, I think you'd really like this, because instead of just being sort of the traditional smoky, sea briny, salty, like literally, if you were to stand on an ocean, if you were to stand on a coast of an ocean, this is what the ocean smells like as it tastes. Like, no joke. This is like ocean spray in your mouth. That's the best way I could say.
Ocean spray in your mouth.
Ocean spray in your mouth. When you smell this, all you get is like, I'm standing on a coast somewhere in my flannel jacket, drinking my whiskey. That's what I get out of this.
So go ahead.
So instead of just sort of the primary, initial salty, briny, smoky, because this has been aged in multiple different casks, there's a lot more depth to it. So you get a lot more of the oak in there. You get some sherry influences. You get some bourbon influences. So there's a lot more going on, and I think you can appreciate this more if you like the smoky end of things. This might be a more complex whiskey to try out.
Interesting. So Anthony Russo, who we're definitely going to have on the show, because I think he knows quite a bit about bourbons, and obviously he does because he sent me like 10 of them. He asked, are you going to talk about rye versus wheated bourbons? And frankly, I have no idea what that means. I know what rye is, but I have no idea.
So that's kind of what we talked about a little bit about how you have to have at least 51% corn. Most of the companies will do generally around 80% corn, but the secondary grain that you use can be up to you. You can use rye, you can use wheat. Most of them, from what I've read, are corn and rye, corn and wheat, or even corn, rye, and wheat. And you can impart pretty significant sort of flavor range. If you try a corn, like a bourbon finished with rye versus a bourbon finished with wheat, there's going to be some very, very different bourbons. Like, they're going to have a lot of different character. Anthony probably has a lot more bourbon experience than both of us combined. So I think maybe we should have him on the show and talk a little bit more about sort of the unique characteristics of one bourbon versus another bourbon, because I think that'd be really interesting.
I would agree with you, because if you don't know it, guess what? I don't know it. I don't know shit. But anyways, so let me while we're talking about, let's get into, for a second, take a step back from bourbons. Is you were just saying that you thought it would pair well with a Rustica.
Rustica.
Let me ask you your opinion on this. There's a lot of people, I think there's a misconception that, I'm going to buy a Rustica, and that's like the poor man's League of Nine, which I think is not anywhere close to the League of Nine. Why do you think some people have that misconception?
I'm not sure, because, I'm sure I'm going to get ribbed for this later, but I look at the Rustica as sort of the same market as the Undercrown. That is, you're trying to hit a particular price point, which is affordable for most smokers. You're still trying to deliver a great flavor experience. I mean, anybody can make a $5 or $6 cigar that sucks, but
This is true.
you know, the Brojito, I really enjoyed it. When I smoked it, my first impression was, wow, they've really come out with something that can compete with the Undercrown, which is, I don't want to call it an everyman cigar, but most people can pick up an Undercrown and enjoy it. They might not think it's the best cigar they've ever smoked in their life, but I challenge somebody to come and say, I hated the Undercrown. Most people will pick up an Undercrown and they'll say, I enjoyed it. It was a good smoke. And I think the Rustica is the same way. You pick up a Rustica and you go, this is a really good smoke. Is it a Liga 9? No, I mean, I don't know why someone would say that. Maybe they're trying to impart some mystique to it. But you look at a Liga 9, and man, they're using some really, really expensive tobacco in that. They're using wrapper that's been aged for 2 or 3 years. I mean, this is very, very expensive tobacco, and it's just economics. If you put that kind of expensive tobacco, you're not going to be able to hit the price point that the Rustica hits. It's not possible.
It's true, and I think that a lot of people are confused that, first of all, the Undercrown has a San Andreas wrapper. The Rustica has, if you look at a lot of Drew Estate stuff, a lot of the Liga Privada and Unico stuff either uses stock cut Habano from Connecticut or U.S. Connecticut broadleaf.
Yep.
And, they'll say U.S. Connecticut broadleaf darks. That's a Liga 9. Notice how dark it is. Rustica is not nearly as dark. That's U.S. broadleaf medium. And I think a lot of people get confused because they say, well, it's got it's got a U.S. broadleaf or Connecticut broadleaf wrapper. It's got a lot of Nicaraguan filler. I mean, it's completely different. I mean, really, in my opinion, I don't even think that the Rustica wasn't necessarily meant to compete with the Undercrown. In my opinion, I think the Undercrown is, I guess, quote unquote, more of a competition where, obviously people in the factory were smoking too many nines, so they said they got to make something cheaper, right? Which is fair enough. And the Undercrown's a great cigar. I prefer the Corona Viva over all the other Bartolos, but that's just me, because it has a little bit more Lajero in it. But the Rustica, for me, it's just pure economics, where you've got a shitload of U.S. Connecticut broadleaf. When you buy a bale of tobacco, a lot of people don't know this, but all of it is not perfect. Like, maybe, I don't know the percentages, but let's say 80% of it is the darks. Well, there's going to be 20% that is not dark enough.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of where the Rustica comes from, where you say, okay, I got this great tobacco, tastes a little bit different, it's not as dark. Well, instead of just throwing it away, or being like some manufacturers, because Drew Estate obviously has a lot of integrity, instead of just throwing that on a cigar and calling it good, they created a whole new blend to use that tobacco. So I think a lot of people think that just because it has a Connecticut broadleaf and has a lot of Nicaraguan fillers in it, they think it's a poor man's 9. It's not true. I just want to set the record straight. Even though it's a pairing show, I'm setting the record straight.
No, we can. I mean, it's a pairing show with cigars, so we can talk cigar. We can wax poetic. I just want to throw this out there, and this is probably going to be a pretty bold opinion, but for me, I think the Rustica has more depth to it than the Undercrown. I think that there's more layers going on. I'm not saying it's a better cigar. I'm just saying, if we sort of compared it to spirits, the Rustica is the cigar that was aged in 3 barrels, and the Undercrown is the cigar that was aged in 1 barrel. I love the Undercrown. I just think there's more depth of character to the Rustica than there is the Undercrown.
Okay, let me rephrase. I would agree with you if you're talking about the Undercrown. I think if you look at the Viva, I think it's a completely different story.
Yeah, absolutely. That cigar is blended in such a way that I think it almost should be its own line. That is, it ceases to become an Undercrown, and you could almost call it the Undercrown Pro or the Undercrown LE. There's something about it that makes it unique. The flavor profile is like any other Undercrown, in my opinion.
I would agree with you, absolutely. So, Surgeon, where are we going in about a week?
So we're going to be taking off in exactly 9 days. We're going to be getting our smoke and drink on in sunny Las Vegas.
We are.
We're going to be going to the International Pipe, Cigar, and something.
International. Hold on. International Premium Cigar and Pipe Retailer.
There we go. Man, I should memorize this. I could be representing the company here.
It's true.
So we're gonna get out there on Friday. I'm gonna be flying in the morning to get settled, get my smoke on, get my drink on, get my gamble on. But the show officially doesn't start till Saturday, correct?
No, Sunday actually.
Oh, really?
So the show does start technically on Saturday, but that's all seminars. They'll have the legislative update. There'll be a lot about the FDA, which will be good. They'll have the social media seminar this year, which I'm not presenting, but we won't have to talk about that. Even though, never mind, we'll just leave it there. And then there'll be the pairings that we talked about. That will be going to that. And then there'll be a couple of other things in there. They usually toss in like a credit card processing thing, which, whatever, doesn't matter to me. Yeah. And the show actually will start, I believe, either 9 or 10. I think, maybe even 8. 8 or 9, 10, whatever. On Saturday morning, as the trade show actually opens. The floor will open, and it'll be nothing but cigar smoking bliss for pretty much 4.5 days.
That sounds pretty awesome. I mean, we're gonna be down there. Some of our listeners who are gonna be down there, find us. Let's go do some pairing. Let's do some smoking, some drinking. Obviously, we can't do it during the show, I don't think, but afterwards. And again, we're gonna be down there on Friday.
You can. You can drink. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well,
I mean, people don't because you're on your feet all day buying shit. Like you're smoking cigars, so there's not really a place to sit down and chill. But yeah, there's a lot of drinking that goes on.
Yeah. So I think Friday and Saturday, there's a great opportunity for us to chill out, hang out, do some smoking, do some drinking, talk pairings, and just hang out and crack wise.
Exactly. So basically, that means that next week, obviously, no show. So the 23rd, no show. We're coming back on the 30th of this month of July after the trade show. Will be our next show. And what are we going to cover, Surgeon?
Well, I think the plan for the 30th is we're going to touch a little bit on. I think we're going to touch a little bit on rums because we're kind of doing the whole circuit on booze. Initially, I thought we might talk a little bit about beer, but I'm going to be pretty wrecked from the show. I don't know if I'm going to be ready to do a show on beer that quick. So we're going to do the show on the 30th on rum, and then I think the show after that we're going to start having some guests on and talk spirits, talk pairings, and get a third person involved here.
We will, because about that time, my baby either going to be Callaway or Kirby, not sure which one yet, but we have eliminated Harper. Will probably be born. So yeah, for a couple of weeks, you'll probably be flying with someone else. I don't know who that'll be. Maybe Anthony Russo. Who knows? There
you go. So we're gonna have an opening spot for a temporary co-host, while you do the responsible thing, which is take care of your baby and wife, which is the correct and responsible thing to do.
This is true.
So we're probably gonna have some floating guest hosts for the next few shows.
Roger. Well, Surgeon, wind it down, and we're out of here. Exactly an hour.
So I want to thank everyone for tuning in to our third show. I'm going to dub my pairing, which is the Lafroig Triple Wood and the Undercrown, in this case the Undercrown Toro. I'm going to call it the Smoky Smoky Cowboy. That is my name for this pairing. Logan, you want to close it out?
Yeah, my Four Roses pairing in Ortega Series D. I'm going to call it Caramel Cracker.
Nice.
The reason why is because Eddie calls me a white cracker, and it kind of tasted like a Werther's Original. Caramel Cracker.
I like it. All right, so peace, Fed heads. We'll be talking to you in 3 weeks here, and hopefully see somebody down at the IPCPR.
Exactly. Have a good night, everyone. Adios.